What happens when a broke woman accidentally kisses a billionaire at 30,000 feet? Lena Brooks is about to find out that one terrifying plane ride will change her entire life. He's a cold CEO with secrets. She's starting over with nothing but courage. But when she walks into her new office Monday morning, the man she swore she'd never see again is sitting behind the boss's desk. Stay with me until the end to see how a girl who could barely afford her plane ticket becomes the woman who brings a billionaire to his knees. And drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The fluorescent lights of LaGuardia Airport buzzed overhead like angry insects. Lena Brooks stood frozen at gate 47, staring at the jetway that led to her future. Or her failure. She wasn't sure which yet. Her entire life fit into one battered suitcase with a broken wheel and a backpack she'd bought at a thrift store for $6. Inside that backpack was everything that mattered. Her laptop that took 5 minutes to boot up, a folder with her new employment contract, $47 in crumpled bills, and a granola bar she was saving for when the hunger got too loud to ignore. She'd spent her last decent money on this ticket. Final boarding call for Flight 2847 to New York JFK, the gate agent announced, her voice clipped and impatient. Lena's hands were shaking. She gripped the straps of her backpack tighter, trying to steady herself. 29 years and 11 months of life, and she'd never been on a plane. Never had a reason to. Never had the money. Growing up in a town where ambition went to die, where her mother cleaned houses and her father drank away anything that resembled hope, flying had seemed like something other people did. Rich people. Lucky people. Not her. But here she was, holding a boarding pass that felt like a golden ticket and a death sentence rolled into one. The new job was real. She'd triple-checked the offer letter, Googled the company obsessively, even called their HR department twice to make sure it wasn't some elaborate scam. Cole Industries. A tech giant. They wanted her as a junior data analyst. The pay was more than she'd ever made in her life, which wasn't saying much considering her previous job was waitressing at a truck stop diner that smelled like burnt coffee and defeat. "Miss, you need to board now," the gate agent said. And there was something in her tone that made Lena feel small. Like she could tell just by looking that Lena didn't belong in airports, didn't belong on planes, didn't belong anywhere near the life she was trying to build. Lena walked forward. Her cheap sneakers squeaked on the polished floor. The jetway was a narrow tunnel that smelled like jet fuel and recycled air. Each step felt heavier than the last. What if the plane crashed? What if she got to New York and realized she couldn't do the job? What if they took one look at her secondhand blazer and scuffed shoes and realized they'd made a terrible mistake? What if? What if? What if? The questions chased themselves around her brain like dogs after their own tails. "Welcome aboard," a flight attendant said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She glanced at Lena's boarding pass. "You're in 12A, window seat, left side." Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. The plane's interior was smaller than she'd imagined. The rows of seats stretched back like the world's most uncomfortable church pews. People were already settled, pulling out tablets and neck pillows, looking bored and comfortable in a way that told her they did this all the time. She found her row. 12A. The window seat was empty, but the aisle seat was occupied by a man who looked like he'd been carved out of marble and money. He was typing something on his phone, his jaw tight with concentration. Dark hair, perfectly cut. A charcoal suit that probably cost more than Lena's entire year of rent. Strong hands, expensive watch, the kind of presence that took up space even when he was sitting still. He didn't look up as she approached. "Excuse me," Lena said quietly. "I need to get to the window seat." He glanced up. His eyes were a startling gray, cold and assessing. For a moment he just looked at her and she felt like a specimen under a microscope. Then he stood without a word, stepping into the aisle to let her pass. She squeezed by him, hyper-aware of how close they were in the tight space, how her backpack bumped against the seats, how utterly out of place she felt. She practically fell into the window seat, her face burning. "Thank you," she mumbled. He didn't respond, just sat back down and returned to his phone like she didn't exist. Lena shoved her backpack under the seat in front of her and tried to make herself small. The window was next to her, offering a view of the tarmac and the wing of the plane. It looked fragile. How was something that fragile supposed to keep them in the air? Her heart was hammering now. "You need to fasten your seatbelt," the man beside her said. His voice was deep, clipped, annoyed. Lena looked down at the seatbelt. It was a simple mechanism, she told herself. Two pieces that clicked together. People did this every day. Children did this. She grabbed both ends and tried to connect them. They didn't fit. She tried again, her fingers clumsy with nerves. Still nothing. "It's upside down," the man said, not looking at her. Lena's face went hot. She flipped one end over and tried again. This time it clicked, but it was twisted, the fabric bunched up awkwardly across her lap. She tried to straighten it, but somehow made it worse, and now the metal buckle was digging into her hip, and the whole thing felt wrong. "For God's sake," the man muttered. He set his phone down and turned to her. "Do you need help?" "No, I'm fine," Lena said quickly, but her voice came out high and strained, and her hands were still fumbling with the seatbelt like she was trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. "You're clearly not fine." He reached over, and before she could protest, his hands were on her seatbelt, his fingers brushing against her waist as he untwisted the fabric and adjusted the buckle. It was quick, efficient, and completely humiliating. "There," he said, pulling back. "It's not complicated." Lena wanted to disappear. She wanted the seat to open up and swallow her whole. "Thank you," she whispered. He was already back on his phone. The flight attendant came by, checking seatbelts and overhead bins. The cabin lights dimmed. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, saying something about weather and flying time, but Lena couldn't focus on the words. Her heart was a wild animal in her chest. The plane started to move. Oh God, this was happening. The engine noise grew louder, a deep rumble that she could feel in her bones. They were taxiing now, rolling toward the runway, and all Lena could think about was how unnatural this was. Humans weren't meant to fly. This was hubris. This was insanity. "Are you all right?" the man beside her asked, and there was something different in his tone now, less annoyed, more concerned. "I'm fine," Lena lied. Her knuckles were white from gripping the armrests. "You don't look fine." "I've never flown before," she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea. What if something goes wrong? What if the engine fails? What if—" "Statistically, flying is safer than driving," he said, cutting off her spiral. "You're more likely to die in a car accident on the way to the airport than on this plane. That's not as comforting as you think it is." The corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "First time flying, and you're doing it alone. I don't really have a choice." She didn't know why she was telling him this. Maybe because he was a stranger and she'd never see him again. Maybe because the fear had cracked her open and the truth was spilling out. "I got a new job. In New York. I had to take it. It's my only shot at something better." He studied her for a moment and she couldn't read his expression. "What kind of job?" "Data analyst for a tech company." "Which company?" "Cole Industries." Something shifted in his face, but before she could identify it, the plane turned onto the runway and the engine noise became a roar. Lena's breath caught. This was it. This was really happening. "Look at me," the man said, and his voice cut through her panic. She turned to him, her eyes wide. "You're going to be fine. The takeoff is the worst part, and it only lasts a minute. Just breathe." "I am breathing." "No, you're hyperventilating. There's a difference." He kept his eyes on hers, steady and calm. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. Slowly." She tried. It didn't really work. The plane was accelerating now, faster and faster, and she could feel the wheels lifting off the ground, and oh God, they were in the air. Nothing but air, nothing holding them up except physics and prayer. Her hand shot out without thinking, grabbing onto something solid. His hand. She realized what she had done a second too late. She was holding hands with a complete stranger, squeezing hard enough to probably cut off his circulation, but he didn't pull away. His hand was warm and strong, and he let her hold on. "You're doing great," he said quietly. The plane climbed higher. Her stomach dropped. The ground fell away below them, buildings becoming toys, cars becoming ants. It was terrifying and beautiful and completely surreal. And then they were above the clouds, the sky opening up into an endless blue, and the plane leveled out. Lena slowly released her death grip on his hand. "I'm sorry," she said, mortified. "I didn't mean to—" "It's fine. I'm not usually this much of a disaster." "Could have fooled me," he said, but there was the faintest hint of amusement in his voice. She risked a glance at him. He was looking at her differently now, like he was actually seeing her instead of just tolerating her presence. His eyes weren't cold anymore. They were curious. "I'm Lena," she said. "Lena Brooks." He hesitated just for a second. "Adrian. Thank you for not making me feel like a complete idiot, Adrian. You made yourself feel like an idiot just fine without my help." She laughed, despite herself, a short, surprised sound. "Wow, brutal honesty. I don't see the point in lying." The seatbelt sign dinged off. People around them started moving, pulling out laptops and books, settling in for the flight. Lena felt herself starting to relax, the adrenaline slowly draining away. "So," Adrian said, "data analyst, are you any good?" "I don't know yet," Lena admitted. "I guess I'll find out." That's a refreshing answer. Most people would oversell themselves. "I don't have enough to oversell." She pulled her backpack out from under the seat, digging around for the granola bar. Her stomach was starting to unknot, and hunger was creeping in. "I barely finished community college. Took me 6 years because I had to work full-time. I taught myself most of the programming and analytics stuff online. This job is way above my experience level. They probably hired me because I was cheap." She didn't know why she was being so honest. Maybe because he was a stranger. Maybe because something about his bluntness made her want to match it. "Or maybe they hired you because you're good at what you do," Adrian said. "Maybe." She unwrapped the granola bar. It was crushed into pieces, but she ate it anyway. "What about you? What do you do?" "I run a company." "What kind of company?" "Tech." "That's vague." "It is," he agreed, and didn't elaborate. She wanted to ask more, but something in his demeanor told her he was done with that topic. So instead, she looked out the window at the clouds below, trying to wrap her mind around the fact that she was in the sky, flying toward a new life. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian said after a moment. "Sure." "Why Cole Industries specifically?" "There are a lot of tech companies." "They were the only ones who called me back," Lena said simply. "I applied to maybe 50 places. Cole Industries was the only one that gave me a chance. So here I am." He nodded slowly, like he was filing that information away. "You'll do fine." "You don't know that." "I do, actually. Anyone who fights this hard for something usually figures out how to make it work." Lena looked at him surprised. "That's almost a compliment." "Don't let it go to your head." She smiled. It felt good to smile. The fear was still there, humming under her skin, but it wasn't drowning her anymore. "You're kind of an asshole, you know that?" "I've been told." They fell into a comfortable silence. Lena pulled out her laptop, thinking she might review some of the training materials Cole Industries had sent her. But the laptop's fan made a horrible whirring noise when she opened it, and the screen flickered twice before stabilizing. "That sounds like it's dying," Adrian observed. "It's been dying for 2 years. I'm just trying to get a few more months out of it." "You should get a new one before you start your job." "With what money?" Lena asked, then immediately regretted it. She sounded bitter. She sounded poor. Which she was, but she didn't need to advertise it. Adrian didn't respond to that. He just watched her struggle with her laptop for another minute before going back to his own phone. An hour passed, then another. Lena tried to work, but the combination of nerves and exhaustion made it impossible to concentrate. She ended up just staring out the window, watching the landscape change below them. "Do you have a place to stay in New York?" Adrian asked suddenly. Lena turned to him. "Why?" "Just curious." "I have a sublet in Brooklyn. I found it on Craigslist. I'm pretty sure it's going to be terrible, but it's what I can afford." "You're moving to New York, starting a new job, and you've never even seen the place you're going to live?" "That's correct." He shook his head, something that might have been disbelief or admiration crossing his face. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Lena said, "but I didn't have a choice. I couldn't stay where I was. That town was killing me slowly. This might kill me quickly, but at least it'll be different." "That's a dark way to look at it." "I'm a realist. You're a pessimist." "Same thing." "It's really not." The flight attendant came by with the drink cart. Lena asked for water. Adrian ordered scotch. Expensive scotch, from the way the flight attendant's eyes lit up. "You're not going to offer me some of that?" Lena asked, half joking. "You want scotch?" "I want to not feel like I'm about to throw up from nerves." He handed her his glass without hesitation. One sip. It's too good to waste on someone who doesn't appreciate it. Lena took a sip. It burned going down and she coughed. That's disgusting. That's a 30-year Macallan. Show some respect. I'd rather have the water. He took the glass back, shaking his head, but she could see the amusement in his eyes. They were talking like they'd known each other longer than a few hours. It was strange, comfortable. She didn't trust it. Another hour passed. The sun was starting to set outside the window, painting the clouds in shades of orange and pink. Lena had almost convinced herself that the rest of the flight would be smooth when the plane suddenly dropped. Not a gentle dip. A stomach-lurching, terrifying drop that made her feel like the bottom had fallen out of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some unexpected turbulence, the pilot's voice said, way too calm for what was happening. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. The plane shook, rattled, dropped again. Lena's hands went to the armrests, gripping so hard her fingers ached. Her breath was coming fast and shallow. This was it. This was how she died. On her first flight, before she even got to try at her new life. Lena, Adrian said, and his voice was steady, grounding. Look at me. She couldn't. She was frozen, staring at the window as the plane bucked and swayed. Lena. His hand covered hers on the armrest. This is normal. Turbulence happens. The plane can handle it. We're going to crash, she said, and her voice was shaking. We're not going to crash. The plane dropped again, and this time Lena made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. She turned away from the window, toward Adrian, and she didn't think. She just moved. She grabbed onto him like he was the only solid thing in a world that was falling apart. And he let her. His arms came around her, strong and sure, and she pressed her face against his chest, trying to block out the sounds of the plane groaning and the overhead bins rattling and the other passengers gasping. You're okay, he said quietly, and one of his hands moved to the back of her head, holding her steady. I've got you. You're okay. The turbulence went on forever. Or maybe it was only a minute. Lena couldn't tell. Time had stopped meaning anything. All she knew was that she was shaking, and Adrian was holding her, and his heartbeat was steady against her ear. And then the plane stopped shaking. The turbulence passed as suddenly as it had started. The cabin lights brightened. The pilot came back on the intercom, apologizing for the rough patch, saying they were clear now. Lena pulled back slowly, reality crashing down on her. She'd just thrown herself at a stranger. She was practically in his lap. His arms were still around her. I'm sorry, she stammered, pulling away completely. I didn't mean to. It's fine, Adrian said, but his voice sounded different, rougher. She looked up at him, and their faces were inches apart. She could see the exact moment everything changed, when concern shifted into something else, something heated and complicated and utterly inappropriate. His eyes dropped to her mouth. She should move. She should pull back. She should do anything except lean closer. But she leaned closer, and he met her halfway. The kiss was not soft. It was not gentle. It was desperate and messy and fueled by adrenaline and fear and something neither of them wanted to name. His hand was in her hair, and her fingers were twisted in his shirt. And for a few heartbeats, the entire world narrowed down to this moment, this connection, this complete and utter insanity. Then someone coughed. The flight attendant was standing in the aisle, her eyes wide, her mouth pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Lena jerked back like she'd been electrocuted. Her face was on fire. Oh God, what had she just done? She'd kissed a stranger. On a plane, in front of people. I need to... She didn't finish the sentence. She just unbuckled her seatbelt and practically threw herself into the aisle, stumbling toward the bathroom at the back of the plane. Her hands were shaking as she locked the bathroom door behind her. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her hair was a mess. Her lips were swollen. Her eyes were too bright. She'd lost her mind. That was the only explanation. The stress of everything had finally broken her brain, and she'd kissed a stranger on an airplane. A stranger who kissed her back. A stranger whose arms had felt like the safest place in the world. Lena splashed cold water on her face, trying to calm down. It was fine. It was fine. The flight was almost over. She'd go back to her seat, avoid eye contact for the remaining 30 minutes, and then she'd never see him again. It would become a weird, embarrassing story she'd never tell anyone. When she came out of the bathroom, the cabin lights were even brighter. They were descending. The flight attendants were preparing for landing. She made her way back to her seat, keeping her eyes down. Adrian was looking out the window, his expression unreadable. She sat down without saying anything, buckling her seatbelt with trembling fingers. Neither of them spoke. The plane descended through the clouds. The lights of New York appeared below, a sprawling galaxy of buildings and bridges and possibilities. It should have been exciting. It should have been the moment Lena felt like her life was beginning. Instead, all she felt was mortified. The wheels touched down with a jolt. The plane taxied to the gate. The seatbelt sign turned off, and people immediately started standing, grabbing bags from overhead bins, crowding the aisles. Lena stayed in her seat until the last possible moment. When she finally stood, Adrian was already in the aisle, pulling down a sleek leather bag from the overhead bin. "Lena," he said. She didn't look at him. "I have to go." "Wait." But she was already moving, pushing past him, weaving through the crowd of passengers. She didn't look back. She couldn't. She made it off the plane, through the jetway, into the terminal. JFK Airport was massive and overwhelming, full of people rushing in every direction. Lena let herself be swept up in the crowd, putting as much distance as possible between herself and Gate 47. Her phone buzzed. A text from the property manager of her sublet, sending her the address and door code. "Welcome to New York," it said. Lena shouldered her backpack, grabbed her suitcase with the broken wheel, and walked toward the exit. She'd just survived her first flight. She'd just started her new life. And she'd just kissed a man whose last name she didn't even know. Tomorrow, she told herself, would be better. Tomorrow, she'd start her job, focus on work, and forget this entire humiliating disaster ever happened. Tomorrow couldn't possibly be worse than today. The Brooklyn sublet was worse than Lena had imagined, which was saying something because her imagination had already set the bar pretty low. The building was a walk-up in Bed-Stuy, 5 floors with no elevator, and the stairwell smelled like old cooking grease and something she really hoped was just mildew. Her apartment was on the 4th floor, a studio that generously measured maybe 200 square feet if you counted the bathroom, which you shouldn't because the shower leaked and the toilet ran constantly. But it was hers. For now. And it had a window that looked out onto a fire escape. And through that fire escape, she could see a sliver of sky, and that was more than she'd had back home. She dropped her suitcase on the floor and sat down on the bed, which was really just a mattress on a metal frame that squeaked when she breathed. Her phone said it was almost midnight. She should sleep. She had to be at Cole Industries at 9 in the morning, and she needed to figure out the subway system, and she should probably eat something other than a crushed granola bar. Instead, she lay back on the mattress and stared at the ceiling, replaying the entire plane ride in excruciating detail. The kiss. She'd kissed him. Or he'd kissed her. Or they'd kissed each other in a moment of mutual insanity, brought on by turbulence and proximity, and whatever chemical reaction happened when fear met attraction. It didn't matter. She'd never see him again. Adrian, with no last name, who drank expensive scotch and ran a vague tech company and had arms that felt safe in the middle of a crisis. He was probably already back in whatever Manhattan penthouse he lived in, probably already forgotten about the awkward girl who'd melted down in seat 12A. Lena closed her eyes and willed herself to forget too. Sleep came eventually, restless and full of dreams about falling. The alarm on her phone went off at 6:30, a shrill sound that made her jolt awake with her heart racing. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. The room was unfamiliar, the sounds were wrong, the light coming through the window was too bright. Then it all came back. New York, new job, new life. She dragged herself out of bed and into the shower, which was exactly as disappointing as it looked. The water pressure was pathetic, and the temperature fluctuated wildly between scalding and freezing, but she managed to wash her hair and feel slightly more human. Her interview outfit was wrinkled from being stuffed in her suitcase, but she did her best with it. Black pants that were a little too big, a white blouse that was a little too small, and the thrift store blazer that had seen better days. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror above the bathroom sink and tried to see what Cole Industries had seen when they hired her. She mostly just saw someone who was terrified. The subway was a nightmare of confusion and too many people, and not enough signs that made sense. Lena got on the wrong train twice before finally figuring out that she needed the C to the E to get to Midtown. By the time she emerged at 53rd Street, she had 7 minutes to get to the office. Cole Industries occupied 15 floors of a glass tower that looked like it cost more than Lena's entire hometown. The lobby was all marble and modern art, and a reception desk that stretched for what felt like a city block. Lena walked in, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, feeling like an imposter. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked. She was impossibly beautiful, with perfect hair and perfect makeup, and a smile that was professionally polite and personally dismissive. "I'm Lena Brooks. I'm starting today. Data analyst." The receptionist typed something into her computer. 15th floor. Check in with HR. The elevator ride up was silent except for the quiet jazz playing through hidden speakers. Lena watched the floor numbers climb and tried to calm her racing heart. She could do this. She'd fought too hard to get here to fall apart now. The 15th floor was open concept, all glass walls and standing desks, and people who looked busy and important. HR was a woman named Monica, who had a clipboard and a smile that was slightly more genuine than the receptionist's. "Lena Brooks, welcome," Monica said, shaking her hand. "You're right on time. Let me get you set up with your badge and your workstation, and then we'll do the orientation." The next 2 hours were a blur of paperwork and building tours and introductions to people whose names Lena immediately forgot. Her workstation was a desk in a pod with 3 other analysts, all of whom looked younger than her and infinitely more confident. They nodded politely when Monica introduced her, then went back to their screens. "You'll be working under the data infrastructure team," Monica explained, pulling up something on Lena's new computer. "Your manager is David Chen. He's in meetings this morning, but he'll check in with you this afternoon. For now, just get familiar with the systems. Your login credentials are here." Monica handed her a packet of information and left. Lena sat down at her desk, staring at the computer screen. The chair was ergonomic and expensive. The monitor was huge. Everything was new and clean, and so far beyond what she was used to that she felt like she'd wandered onto a movie set. "First day?" the guy at the desk next to hers asked. He was maybe 25, with messy hair and glasses and a coffee mug that said, "I void warranties." "That obvious?" Lena asked. "You have that deer in headlights look. I'm Marcus." "Lena. Where'd you come from?" "Missouri, small town. You wouldn't know it. And now you're here. That's a hell of a jump." "Tell me about it." Marcus grinned. "You'll be fine. The work's not that bad once you figure out the systems. And if you need anything, just ask. Well, don't ask Trevor." He nodded toward one of the other analysts, a guy in a button-down shirt who was typing with the aggressive intensity of someone very angry at his keyboard. "He's an asshole, but the rest of us are okay." "Good to know." Lena spent the rest of the morning trying to navigate the company's database systems and feeling progressively more lost. Everything was more complex than she'd anticipated, layers upon layers of security protocols and data structures that didn't match anything she'd taught herself online. By lunch, she had a headache and a growing sense that she was in way over her head. She ate a sandwich from a deli across the street, sitting on a bench in a small plaza between buildings, watching New Yorkers rush past with their important lives and their purpose. She didn't feel like she belonged here. She felt like a kid playing dress-up. When she got back to her desk, there was an email waiting. Company-wide meeting at 2 p.m. Attendance mandatory. Conference room on the 20th floor. "What's this about?" Lena asked Marcus. He looked at his own email and shrugged. "Probably some corporate thing, new quarter goals or whatever. Cole likes to do these big presentations sometimes." "Cole?" "Adrian Cole, the CEO. You know, the guy who runs this whole place?" Lena's stomach dropped. "Adrian Cole? Yeah, he's kind of a legend. Built this company from nothing. Now it's worth billions. He's also supposedly a nightmare to work for, but I've never actually met him. He stays up on the executive floors mostly." Lena couldn't breathe. Adrian Cole. The man from the plane was Adrian Cole, the CEO, her boss. The man she'd kissed in a moment of turbulence-induced insanity. "You okay?" Marcus asked. "You look like you're going to pass out." "I'm fine," Lena lied. "Just low blood sugar." She was not fine. She was the opposite of fine. She was catastrophically, apocalyptically not fine. At 1:55, she followed the stream of employees heading to the 20th floor. The conference room was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and enough chairs for maybe 100 people. Lena found a seat in the back, trying to make herself invisible. The room filled up. People chatted, checked their phones, grabbed coffee from the station set up in the corner. Lena kept her eyes down, her heart hammering. At exactly 2 o'clock, the door at the front of the room opened. Adrian Cole walked in. He looked different than he had on the plane. More polished, more intimidating. He wore a navy suit that fit him perfectly, and his dark hair was styled back, and he moved with the kind of confidence that came from owning everything in sight. He was followed by two other executives, a man and a woman, both carrying tablets and looking serious. Adrian stepped up to the podium at the front of the room. He didn't smile. He just looked out at the assembled employees with those sharp gray eyes, and the room went quiet. "Thank you all for coming," he said. His voice carried easily, no microphone needed. "I'll keep this brief. We're beginning Q2, and I want to lay out our priorities for the next 3 months." He started talking about growth projections and new client acquisitions and infrastructure upgrades. Lena tried to focus on his words, but all she could think about was the fact that she'd had her tongue in this man's mouth less than 24 hours ago. She wanted to die. Actually die. Just cease to exist. And then, as if the universe hadn't humiliated her enough, Adrian's eyes swept across the room and landed on her. He stopped mid-sentence. It was just for a second, maybe less, but Lena saw the recognition flash across his face, saw the momentary break in his perfect composure. Then it was gone, and he continued talking like nothing had happened, but Lena's face was on fire, and her hands were shaking, and she was absolutely certain that everyone in the room could tell that something had just happened, even if they didn't know what. The meeting lasted another 20 minutes. Adrian laid out expectations, introduced some new department heads, talked about a major security upgrade they were implementing. Lena absorbed maybe 10% of it. The rest was just white noise under the screaming panic in her head. When the meeting finally ended, Lena bolted. She was out of her chair and halfway to the door before most people had even stood up. She made it to the elevator, jabbed the button for the 15th floor, and prayed that the doors would close before, "Hold the elevator!" a voice called. Lena's hand shot out on instinct, stopping the doors. 3 people got in, chatting about the meeting, and Lena tried to blend into the back corner. The elevator stopped on 18, then 17, then 16. People got off. People got on. And then, on the 16th floor, Adrian Cole stepped into the elevator. He was alone now, the other executives gone. He stepped in, pressed the button for 20, and turned around. His eyes met Lena's. She looked away immediately, staring at the floor numbers like they were the most fascinating thing she'd ever seen. The other people in the elevator got off on 15. The doors closed. They were alone. "Lena Brooks?" Adrian said quietly. "Mr. Cole," she managed. "You work here." "Apparently." "You didn't think to mention that on the plane? You didn't think to mention that you were the CEO? I don't generally introduce myself with my job title." "Neither do I." The elevator continued up. Lena could feel him looking at her, but she kept her eyes fixed on the doors. "This is a problem," Adrian said. "You think? We need to talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. We can both just pretend it never happened." "Can we?" Lena finally looked at him. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made her chest tight. "We have to. You're the CEO. I'm a junior analyst. There is no version of this that isn't a disaster." The elevator stopped on 20. The doors opened. Adrian didn't move. "My office. Tomorrow. 8 a.m. "What?" "We're going to talk about this like adults. Tomorrow. 8 a.m. He stepped out of the elevator, then turned back. "And Lena, don't be late." The doors closed before she could respond. Lena made it back to her desk and sat down in a daze. Marcus glanced over at her. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Something like that. She spent the rest of the afternoon in a fog, barely processing anything on her screen. At 5:30, most people started packing up. Lena stayed. She didn't want to go back to her depressing sublet. She didn't want to sit alone with her thoughts. So she kept working, trying to make sense of the database systems, trying to be useful. By 7, the office was mostly empty. Just a few other people scattered around, equally unwilling to go home. Lena was deep in a tangle of code, trying to trace a data flow path, when an alert popped up on her screen. "Security breach detected. Unauthorized access attempt on server cluster 7. Lena frowned. That didn't seem right. She clicked on the alert, pulling up the security logs. Someone was trying to access the company's client database. Multiple attempts, different entry points, sophisticated enough to get past the first 2 layers of security. This wasn't a drill. This was real. Lena's fingers flew across the keyboard. She pulled up the network monitoring tools, traced the intrusion attempts, saw the pattern. Someone was systematically probing for weaknesses, looking for a way in. And they were good. Really good. She should call someone. IT security, her manager. Someone who actually knew what they were doing, but her manager was gone for the day. IT security was probably gone too. And every second she wasted, this person got closer to breaching the system. Lena made a decision. She started building a counter-intrusion protocol, something she'd learned from a hacker forum she used to lurk on when she was teaching herself code. It was risky. It was probably against company policy. But it might work. She implemented the first layer, watching the logs. The intrusion attempt slowed, then stopped, then started again from a different angle. Whoever this was, they were adapting. Lena built another layer, then another. She was so focused that she didn't hear footsteps behind her until someone spoke. "What are you doing?" Lena jumped, spinning around. Adrian was standing behind her desk, his suit jacket gone, his tie loosened. He looked tired. "There's a security breach," Lena said quickly. "Someone's trying to access the client database. I'm trying to stop them." Adrian moved closer, looking at her screen. "Why didn't you call IT? It's after 7. I didn't think anyone was here, and I didn't want to waste time while this person got deeper into the system." He pulled out his phone, made a call. "Marcus, I need you in the office now. We have a situation." He hung up and looked back at Lena's screen. "Show me what you're doing." Lena walked him through it, explaining the intrusion pattern, the countermeasures she'd built, the vulnerabilities she'd identified. Adrian listened, his expression intense, asking sharp questions that told her he actually understood what she was talking about. "This is good work," he said finally, "but you're treating the symptoms, not the cause. They're going to keep probing until they find a weakness." "I know. I'm trying to reinforce the weak points, but there are too many." "Then don't reinforce them. Lock them down completely." He leaned over her keyboard, his arm brushing against hers, and typed a series of commands that brought up a different part of the system. "Cut off external access to the entire cluster. It'll inconvenience some remote workers, but it'll stop the breach." "Won't that trigger alerts across the whole company?" "Yes, which is fine. People should know we're under attack." Lena executed the lockdown. The intrusion attempt stopped immediately. Her screen lit up with alerts, notifications, messages from automated systems flagging the sudden change. Adrian's phone started ringing. He ignored it. "How did you spot this?" he asked. "I was just working late, and the alert popped up. I thought it might be a false alarm, but when I checked the logs, the pattern was too consistent." "And you know how to build counter-intrusion protocols? Because I taught myself. Online forums, hacker communities, YouTube tutorials. I know it's not official training, but it's better than official training," Adrian interrupted. "Official training teaches you to follow procedures. What you did was creative problem-solving under pressure." Lena didn't know what to say to that. She was very aware of how close he was standing, how she could smell his cologne, how his presence made the air feel charged. The elevator dinged. A man in his 40s rushed out, slightly out of breath. He had ET security written all over him. "What's going on?" he asked, heading straight for them. "Someone tried to breach server cluster 7, Adrian said. Lena caught it and locked them out." The security guy, Marcus, apparently not the same Marcus from her pod, looked at Lena with surprise. "You caught it?" "I was just here," Lena said. "I saw the alert." "Can you pull up the logs for me?" Lena did. Marcus, the security guy, spent the next 10 minutes reviewing everything, muttering to himself, occasionally asking Lena questions about what she'd seen. Finally, he looked up at Adrian. "This was a serious attempt, sophisticated. If she hadn't caught it when she did, they might have gotten in." "Can you trace them?" Adrian asked. "I can try. It'll take time. They were routing through multiple proxies." "Do it. And I want a full security audit by the end of the week. Every system, every access point, no exceptions." "Yes, sir." Marcus left. The office was quiet again. Adrian turned back to Lena. "You saved the company a lot of trouble tonight." "I just did what made sense." "Most people wouldn't have known what made sense. They would have panicked or ignored it or made it worse." He paused. "You're better than your resume suggested." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." Lena stood up from her desk. Her legs were shaky from the adrenaline crash. "Are we done here? Because I really should." 8 a.m. tomorrow, Adrian said. My office. We still need to talk. About what happened on the plane. Among other things, yes. What other things? You'll find out tomorrow. He picked up his jacket from where he'd draped it over a nearby chair. Get some rest, Lena. You've earned it. He walked toward the elevator, and Lena watched him go, her mind spinning. She'd just stopped a cyber attack. She'd just had a conversation with the CEO that didn't end in complete humiliation. She'd just been told she was better than expected. And tomorrow, she had to sit in his office and talk about the kiss. Lena grabbed her bag and headed for the elevator. The subway ride back to Brooklyn was packed with people heading home from late shifts and evening plans. Lena stood in the corner of the car, holding onto a pole, replaying everything that had just happened. When she got back to her sublet, she heated up a cup of instant ramen and ate it sitting on her squeaky bed, staring at her laptop screen. She should sleep. She should prepare for tomorrow's conversation. She should do literally anything productive. Instead, she Googled Adrian Cole. The results were extensive. Articles about his rise in the tech world, his company's valuation, his reputation as a ruthless but brilliant CEO. Photos from charity galas and business conferences, always looking sharp and controlled. A few gossip pieces speculating about his personal life, which he apparently kept extremely private. And then, buried several pages deep, an article from 3 years ago. Tech CEO Adrian Cole files for divorce. Lena clicked on it. The details were vague, protected by legal language and NDAs, but the basics were there. He'd been married to someone named Victoria Ashford, a marketing executive. The marriage had ended badly, no kids mentioned. Lena closed her laptop. It was none of her business. His personal life was none of her business. The kiss was a mistake, and tomorrow they would have an awkward conversation about maintaining professionalism, and then they would both move on. Except she couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at her in the elevator, the way his voice had gone rough when he said her name, the way he'd stood close to her while they dealt with the security breach, like the proximity was natural. She was reading into things. She was creating problems that didn't exist. Lena forced herself to get ready for bed. She set 3 alarms on her phone, all for 6 a.m., because she could not be late tomorrow. She lay down on the mattress, pulled the thin blanket up to her chin, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow was going to be a disaster. She could feel it, but at least she'd saved the company's data tonight. At least she'd proven she could do something right. That had to count for something. Sleep came eventually, restless and full of dreams where she was falling and Adrian was catching her over and over, and she never quite figured out if she wanted him to or not. The alarms went off at 6, harsh and unforgiving. Lena dragged herself through another terrible shower, put on her second-best outfit, which was somehow worse than her first-best outfit, and made it to the subway with enough time to grab coffee from a cart on the street. The coffee was bad, but it was hot and caffeinated, and that was all that mattered. She made it to Cole Industries at 7:45. The executive floor was quiet, just a few assistants setting up for the day. Lena stood in front of the door to Adrian's office, holding her terrible coffee, trying to gather courage. At exactly 8 a.m., the door opened. Adrian stood there looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "You're on time. You told me not to be late. Come in." His office was enormous, all glass and steel and a view of the city that probably cost more per month than Lena's entire sublet. There was a massive desk, a sitting area with a leather couch, and walls covered in screens showing what looked like real-time company data. Adrian gestured to the sitting area. "Sit." Lena sat on the edge of the couch, still holding her coffee like a shield. Adrian sat in the chair across from her, leaning back, studying her. "So," he said, "let's address the obvious." "The kiss," Lena said flatly. "The kiss. It was a mistake. I was scared, you were there, the turbulence happened, and my brain short-circuited. It didn't mean anything." "Is that what you think?" "That's what I know." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "You're right that it was a mistake. You're right that it complicates things. But you're wrong that it didn't mean anything." Lena's throat went dry. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. About you. Which is a problem, because you work for me, and there are about 1,000 rules against this, and I don't do complicated." "Then we agree it can't happen again." "We do." "So why am I here?" Adrian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Because I need to know if you can work here knowing what happened between us. I need to know if you can be professional. Can you? Lena shot back. Yes. Then so can I. Just like that? Just like that. Lena set her coffee down on the table between them. Look, I need this job. I fought too hard to get here to throw it away because of one stupid kiss. So yes, I can be professional. I can pretend it never happened. I can treat you like any other boss. Can you do the same? Adrian's eyes were locked on hers, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he nodded slowly. Yes. Good. But there's something else we need to discuss. What? What you did last night, stopping that security breach. That wasn't junior analyst level work. Lena shifted uncomfortably. I just did what I thought would help. You did what would have taken our security team hours to figure out, and you did it in minutes with no backup, using techniques that aren't part of any official training. Adrian stood up, walking to the windows. I want you moved to a different position. What? You're wasted in data infrastructure. I want you on the security team. Direct report to me. Lena's mind went blank. You want me to report directly to you? Yes. That's insane. Why? Because I've been here one day. Because I'm not qualified. Because you just said we need to maintain professional boundaries and now you want me working directly under you? Under me professionally, Adrian clarified. This isn't about what happened on the plane. This is about the fact that you have skills this company needs, and I don't waste talent. I can't do this. Why not? Because everyone will think I'm sleeping with you to get ahead, Lena said bluntly. Adrian turned to face her. Are you sleeping with me? No? Then it doesn't matter what people think. You earned this. Take it. Lena stood up, her hands clenched into fists. You don't get it. You're the CEO. You're a billionaire. You can do whatever you want and people will justify it. I'm the poor girl from nowhere who got here on luck. If you promote me after one day, everyone will assume the worst. Let them. Easy for you to say. Nothing about this is easy, Adrian said quietly. But I'm offering you an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you. Lena looked at him, this man who'd held her during turbulence, who'd kissed her like the world was ending, who was now offering her everything she'd ever wanted and making it impossibly complicated at the same time. I need to think about it, she said finally. You have until Monday. That's only 3 days. Then you'd better think fast. Lena walked out of Adrian's office with her head spinning and her coffee gone cold. She had until Monday to decide whether to accept a promotion that would either make her career or destroy it before it even started. 3 days to figure out if she was brave enough to take what she'd earned or smart enough to run from the mess it would create. She spent the rest of Thursday buried in work, ignoring the curious looks from Marcus when she returned to her desk looking like she'd been through a war. By Friday, word had somehow spread that she'd stopped a security breach, and people kept stopping by to congratulate her or ask technical questions that made it clear they thought it was dumb luck rather than skill. So you just happened to be working late? One of the senior analysts asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. Yeah, Lena said, not looking up from her screen. Just happened to be here. And you just happen to know how to stop a sophisticated intrusion attempt? I guess so. He lingered for another moment, clearly waiting for her to elaborate, to prove herself, to justify her existence. When she didn't, he walked away muttering something under his breath. Marcus rolled his chair over. Don't let Greg get to you. He's been here 5 years and hasn't done anything half that impressive. He's just bitter. Everyone's going to think I didn't earn this, Lena said quietly. Earn what? She looked at him, then shook her head. Nothing. Forget it. That evening, Lena sat in her sublet eating takeout pad thai that cost almost as much as her daily food budget, staring at her phone. She'd pulled up Adrian's promotion offer in her email, reading it over and over. The salary was double what she was making now. The title was Junior Security Analyst, direct report to CEO. The start date was Monday. She could change her life with one email. Yes or no. Accept or decline. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. Have you decided? A C, Lena stared at it. He'd gotten her number from HR, probably. Or maybe he just had access to everything because he was the CEO and this was his company and his world, and she was just trying not to drown in it. She typed back, still thinking. His response came immediately. Think faster. Why does it matter to you? Because I don't like wasting time, and you're wasting yours if you say no. Lena set the phone down and pressed her palms against her eyes. This was insane. All of it. She'd been in New York for 3 days, and her life had already spiraled into something unrecognizable. But maybe that was the point. Maybe you didn't change your life by playing it safe. Maybe you changed it by saying yes to the terrifying things. She picked up her phone and typed, "I'll take the job." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Good, my office Monday, 7 a.m. We have work to do." Lena spent the weekend exploring Brooklyn, trying to orient herself in a city that felt too big and too fast and too expensive. She walked until her feet hurt, ate $8 pizza, and tried not to think about Monday. But Monday came anyway, relentless and unavoidable. She showed up at Adrian's office at 6:55 a.m. because she'd rather be early than give him any reason to question her commitment. His assistant wasn't in yet, but the door to his office was open. Adrian was already at his desk, reading something on his tablet, a cup of coffee steaming beside him. "You're early," he said without looking up. "You said 7. I said 7 because I knew you'd show up at 6:55. He set the tablet down and gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit. We need to go over your new responsibilities." For the next hour, Adrian walked her through what her role would actually entail. She'd be part of a small team responsible for identifying vulnerabilities in the company's systems before anyone else could exploit them. She'd have access to parts of the infrastructure that most employees never saw. And she'd report directly to him on anything that could pose a serious threat. "This isn't a promotion because I like you," Adrian said bluntly. "This is a promotion because you're good at what you do. Don't make me regret it." "I won't." "And Lena?" He looked at her directly, his gray eyes sharp. "What happened on the plane stays on the plane. Here, I'm your boss. You're my employee. Nothing else." "I know." "Do you?" "Yes," Lena said firmly. "I'm not going to make this complicated. I need this job more than I need anything else." Something flickered across his face, but it was gone before she could identify it. "Good. Then let's get to work." The next 3 weeks were brutal. Lena threw herself into her new role with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. She worked 12-hour days, sometimes longer, learning systems and protocols and security frameworks until her brain felt like it was going to leak out of her ears. Adrian was demanding, perfectionist, and apparently incapable of giving praise that wasn't wrapped in criticism. "This vulnerability assessment is incomplete," he said one afternoon, dropping a report on her desk. "I checked every system on the list you gave me," Lena protested. "You checked the obvious ones. What about the peripheral systems? The third-party integrations? The legacy databases that everyone forgets about until they become a problem? Those weren't on the list. Because I wanted to see if you'd think beyond the list." Lena grabbed the report back, her jaw tight. "So this is a test?" "Everything is a test. If you can't handle that, you're in the wrong job." He walked away before she could respond, and Lena sat there fuming, hating him a little bit, and hating herself more for caring what he thought. But she went back through the assessment, found the peripheral systems, and discovered 2 vulnerabilities that absolutely should have been caught months ago. When she submitted the revised report, Adrian read it in silence, then looked up at her. "Better." "That's it? Just better? What do you want, a trophy?" "I want to know if I'm doing this right." "You're doing it right. If you weren't, you wouldn't still be here." He handed the report back to her. "Implement the fixes by end of week." It was the closest thing to approval she'd gotten, and it shouldn't have felt as good as it did. By the end of the 3rd week, Lena had settled into a rhythm. She knew which coffee cart made the best breakfast sandwiches, which subway car was least crowded in the morning, and which of her coworkers were worth talking to, and which ones were just waiting for her to fail. She'd also learned that Adrian was at his desk by 6 every morning and rarely left before 8 at night, that he took his coffee black with no sugar, and that he had a kid he never talked about but sometimes got phone calls from that made his whole face change. She'd learned all of this by accident, just by proximity, and she tried very hard not to think about what it meant that she'd noticed. On a Tuesday in early May, Adrian called her into his office with an urgency that made her stomach drop. When she walked in, he was on the phone, speaking in what sounded like German, his tone clipped and frustrated. He waved her into a chair and continued the conversation for another minute before hanging up. "Problem?" Lena asked. "Major problem." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. We're trying to close a deal with a tech consortium in Berlin. $1 billion contract. We've been negotiating for 8 months, and we're finally at the closing stage, but the lead investor is getting cold feet. What does that have to do with me? I need to go to Berlin tomorrow. I need to meet with them in person, smooth over whatever concerns they have, and get this deal done. He looked at her. And I need you to come with me. Lena blinked. What? The investor's primary concern is our security infrastructure. He wants assurances that we can protect his data, his clients' data, everything. You're the one who stopped that breach. You're the one who's been rebuilding our protocols. I need you there to answer his technical questions. You have an entire security team, people with actual experience. I have you, and you're better than half of them. That's not true. It is, actually. You just don't believe it yet. Adrian stood up, walking to the windows. This is not a request, Lena. This is your job. We leave tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pack for 3 days. Lena's mind was racing. Berlin, Germany. 3 days in a foreign country with Adrian Cole. I don't have a passport. Yes, you do. HR processed it as part of your onboarding. I've never left the country. Then this will be educational. Adrian, it's Mr. Cole at work, remember? He turned to look at her. Unless you're about to tell me you can't do this, in which case we have a bigger problem. Lena stood up, her hands clenched. I can do this. Then go home, pack, and meet me at the airport tomorrow at 4. We'll fly private. Of course we will, Lena muttered. She spent that evening in a panic, throwing clothes into her suitcase and Googling what people wore to billion-dollar business meetings in Berlin. Her wardrobe was pathetic, a collection of cheap blazers and wrinkled shirts that barely passed as professional. She ended up buying 2 new outfits on her credit card, wincing at the total, but knowing she couldn't show up looking like she'd raided a clearance rack. The next day crawled by. Lena tried to work but couldn't focus, her mind jumping between terror about the flight, terror about the meeting, and terror about spending 3 days in close proximity to Adrian while pretending she didn't remember what it felt like to kiss him. At 3:30, she grabbed her suitcase and headed for the airport. Adrian had sent a car for her, which felt absurd and wasteful, and also kind of amazing because she didn't have to figure out the subway with luggage. The driver was silent and professional, and Lena spent the entire ride staring out the window, trying to calm her racing heart. The private terminal at Teterboro was nothing like the chaos of LaGuardia. It was quiet, elegant, and full of people who looked like they flew private all the time. Lena felt completely out of place in her new blazer and her old suitcase. Adrian was already there, talking on his phone and looking irritated. When he saw her, he ended the call and walked over. You're on time. You sound surprised. I'm never surprised by you anymore. He nodded toward the plane visible through the window. It was sleek and white and looked like it cost more than a small country. Ready? No. Good. Neither am I. The plane was even more ridiculous inside. Leather seats that reclined into beds, a conference table, a full bar. Lena sat down in one of the seats and tried not to touch anything expensive. Adrian settled across from her, pulling out his laptop. We'll go over the talking points during the flight. The investor's name is Klaus Werner. He's brilliant, paranoid, and has very specific concerns about data sovereignty and EU privacy regulations. I don't know anything about EU privacy regulations. You'll learn. He opened a document and turned the laptop toward her. Read this. The next 7 hours were a crash course in international business and European data law. Adrian was relentless, firing questions at her, making her rehearse answers until they sounded natural, pushing her until she wanted to scream. But somewhere over the Atlantic, something shifted. They fell into a rhythm, the back and forth becoming almost easy, and Lena realized she was enjoying it. The challenge, the problem-solving, the way Adrian's face changed when she said something that impressed him. You're good at this, he said at one point, leaning back in his seat with something that might have been satisfaction. At what? Thinking on your feet. Most people freeze when I push them. You push back. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. You really need to work on your compliments. The corner of his mouth twitched. Noted. They landed in Berlin at 8 a.m. local time. Lena had barely slept on the flight, too wired and anxious to relax, and she felt like her brain was stuffed with cotton. A car was waiting for them, and Adrian handed her a coffee as they slid into the back seat. Drink this. The meeting's in 2 hours. The hotel was beautiful, all modern design and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Adrian checked them in while Lena stood in the lobby, trying not to gawk like a tourist. When he came back, he handed her a key card. "You're on the 8th floor. I'm on the 10th. Shower change and meet me in the lobby in 90 minutes. Lena's room was bigger than her entire Brooklyn sublet. She took the world's fastest shower, put on one of her new outfits, and tried to make herself look like someone who belonged in a billion-dollar negotiation. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a girl playing dress-up, but it would have to do. Adrian was waiting in the lobby, wearing a different suit that somehow looked even more expensive than the one he'd worn on the plane. He looked her over, his expression unreadable. "You look professional." "That's reassuring. Let's go." The meeting was held in a conference room on the top floor of a glass building in the financial district. Klaus Werner was in his 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, and he looked at Lena like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. There were 4 other people in the room, all speaking rapid German to each other, all ignoring Adrian and Lena completely. Then Klaus switched to English, his accent thick but his words precise. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming. And this is?" "Lena Brooks," Adrian said. "My lead security analyst." Klaus looked at Lena with renewed interest. "You're very young for such a position." "I'm good at my job," Lena said, meeting his eyes. "We shall see." Klaus gestured to the table. "Please, sit." The next 2 hours were intense. Klaus asked technical questions that would have made most people's eyes glaze over, drilling into encryption protocols and data redundancy and breach response procedures. Lena answered every single one, sometimes deferring to Adrian for business context, but holding her own on the technical details. And then Klaus said something in German, looking directly at her. Lena understood every word. She'd grown up in a town with a large German immigrant community. Her neighbor had been a woman named Frau Schmidt, who'd taught her the language in exchange for help with grocery shopping. Lena had never thought it would be useful for anything except talking to Frau Schmidt. She responded in German, explaining the company's security architecture in detail, and Klaus's entire face changed. "You speak German," he said, switching to English and looking delighted. "I do. Why didn't you say so?" "You didn't ask." Klaus laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise everyone in the room. He said something else in German, a question about their disaster recovery protocols, and Lena answered fluently. The conversation flowed from there, half in English and half in German, and Lena watched the skepticism in Klaus's face gradually transform into something like respect. Adrian was watching her too, and when she glanced at him, there was something in his expression that made her chest tight. By the end of the meeting, Klaus was shaking her hand warmly. "Ms. Brooks, you have impressed me. This is rare. Thank you. And you, Mr. Cole, you have excellent taste in employees." Klaus turned to Adrian. "I believe we can move forward with this agreement. My lawyers will contact yours." They shook hands, and just like that, the deal was done. Walking out of the building, Adrian was silent until they reached the street. Then he turned to Lena. "You speak German?" "Yes." "Fluent German?" "Yes." "And you didn't think to mention this at any point in the last 3 weeks?" "It didn't come up." Adrian stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. "You're full of surprises." "Is that a problem?" "No," he said quietly. "It's not." They spent the rest of the day in meetings with Klaus's team, hammering out details and timelines. By the time they got back to the hotel, it was past 9 and Lena was exhausted. Adrian walked her to the elevator. "You did well today," he said. "Just well?" "Exceptionally well. You saved that deal." "We saved it." "No, you did." He looked at her, and the professional distance that he'd maintained so carefully for weeks seemed to crack just slightly. "Have dinner with me." Lena's heart jumped. "What?" "Dinner. There's a restaurant on the top floor. We should celebrate." "That's not a good idea." "Probably not. But I'm asking anyway." She should say no. She should go to her room, order room service, and maintain the boundaries they'd agreed on. But she was in Berlin, in a beautiful hotel, and Adrian was looking at her like she was something more than just an employee, and she was so tired of pretending she didn't feel the pull between them. "Okay," she said. "Dinner." The restaurant was elegant and intimate, with soft lighting and a view of the city that took her breath away. They sat at a table by the window, And for the first time since they'd met, they talked without the weight of work between them. Adrian told her about building the company from nothing, about the mistakes he'd made, about the loneliness of being responsible for thousands of people's livelihoods. "It's not what people think," he said. "Everyone sees the money and the power and thinks it must be easy. They don't see the nights you can't sleep because one wrong decision could destroy everything." "Do you regret it?" Lena asked. "No, but I wonder sometimes what it cost me." "Like what?" He was quiet for a moment. "I have a son, Ethan. He's 7. I barely see him. Because of work? Because of the divorce." Adrian's jaw tightened. "His mother has primary custody. I get him every other weekend and some holidays if her schedule allows. Which it usually doesn't. That's terrible. It's what I agreed to. I thought if I didn't fight, it would be easier for him, less conflict. Turns out all it did was make me a stranger in my own kid's life." Lena reached across the table without thinking, putting her hand over his. "You're not a stranger. You're his father." Adrian looked down at her hand, then up at her face. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make things sound simple when they're not." "I don't know. How do you make everything sound like a problem that needs solving?" He laughed, short and surprised. "Touché." They ordered food, drank wine, and talked about everything except work. Lena told him about growing up poor, about her mother who'd worked herself to exhaustion, about the town she'd left behind. Adrian listened like every word mattered, and somewhere between the second and third glass of wine, Lena forgot to be careful. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Go ahead." "Why did you really bring me to Berlin? You could have brought anyone from the security team, someone with more experience." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Because I trust you, and because I wanted to see if my instinct about you was right." "Was it?" "Yes." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You're the best hire I've made in years, Lena. Maybe ever." She didn't know what to say to that. The air between them felt charged, heavy with things neither of them was saying. When the waiter brought the check, Adrian paid without looking at it, and they walked to the elevator in silence. They stopped on her floor. Lena stepped out into the hallway, then turned back. "Thank you for dinner, for bringing me here." "You earned it." She should walk away. She should go to her room. She should not stand there looking at him like she was waiting for something to happen. "Lena," Adrian said, and his voice was rough. "Don't," she said quietly. "We agreed. Professional boundaries." "I know what we agreed." "Then stick to it." He stepped out of his elevator, and suddenly they were inches apart in the empty hallway. "What if I don't want to?" "Adrian, tell me you don't feel this." "It doesn't matter what I feel. It matters to me." Lena's breath caught. She could see the exact moment he was going to kiss her, could have stopped it, should have stopped it. But when his hand came up to cup her face and his mouth found hers, she kissed him back. It was different than the plane. Slower. Deliberate. A choice they were both making with full awareness of how stupid it was. His other hand slid into her hair, and she grabbed onto his jacket, and for a few perfect moments nothing else existed except this. Then reality crashed back in. Lena pulled away, breathing hard. "We can't do this." "I know. You're my boss." "I know. This is exactly what we said wouldn't happen." "I know," Adrian said, and he sounded wrecked. "But I can't stop thinking about you. I haven't been able to since the plane. And tonight, watching you in that meeting, seeing you hold your own with Klaus, speaking German like it was nothing," he broke off. "You're extraordinary, Lena. Don't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I'll start believing them." He kissed her again, softer this time, and Lena let herself have it for just a moment longer before she pulled away completely. "I have to go," she said. "Lena." "Good night, Adrian." She walked to her room without looking back, closed the door, and leaned against it, her heart racing. What had she just done? What had they just done? Her phone buzzed, a text from Adrian. "I'm sorry." She typed back, "Me too." Then, "Let's just forget this happened." His response took a long time. "If you can forget, you're stronger than me." Lena didn't respond. She got ready for bed, lay down in the too comfortable hotel sheets, and stared at the ceiling. This was a disaster. This was going to ruin everything. But when she closed her eyes, all she could think about was the way he'd looked at her in the hallway, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. She was in so much trouble. The next morning was agony. They had breakfast with Klaus's team, all business and contracts, and carefully maintained professionalism. Adrian didn't look at her more than necessary, and when he did, his face was completely neutral. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like a wound. They flew back to New York that afternoon. The flight was quiet, both of them working on their laptops, maintaining careful distance. When they landed, Adrian's driver dropped Lena at her apartment first. "See you Monday," Adrian said, still not quite meeting her eyes. "Monday," Lena agreed. She hauled her suitcase up the 4 flights of stairs, unlocked her door, and dropped everything on the floor. Her apartment felt smaller than ever, dim and depressing after the Berlin hotel. She should unpack. She should eat something. She should do literally anything productive. Instead, she sat on her bed and let herself fall apart just a little bit. Monday morning came too fast. Lena arrived at work early, steeling herself for the awkwardness. But when she got to her desk, there was an envelope waiting for her. Inside was a handwritten note from Adrian. "Thank you for your work in Berlin. You made the impossible happen. AC." It was professional, appropriate, exactly what a boss would write to an employee who'd done well. It gave her absolutely nothing to hold on to. Lena crumpled the note and threw it away. The next 2 weeks were torture. She and Adrian maintained perfect professional distance, communicating mostly through emails and the occasional brief meeting where they talked about security protocols and system upgrades and never once mentioned Berlin. Lena threw herself into work with even more intensity, staying late, coming in early, doing anything to avoid thinking about how badly she'd messed up. And then, on a Thursday afternoon, everything fell apart. Lena was at her desk when Adrian's assistant appeared. "Mr. Cole needs to see you. His office. Now." The tone was strange. Urgent. Lena grabbed her laptop and headed upstairs, her stomach knotting. When she walked into Adrian's office, he wasn't alone. There was a woman there, mid-30s, blonde, beautiful in an intimidating way, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Lena made in a month. She was standing close to Adrian, her hand on his arm, and when she saw Lena, she smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "So this is her," the woman said, "the new assistant." "Lena's not my assistant," Adrian said, his voice tight. "She's my security analyst." "Of course." The woman's smile widened. "I'm Victoria, Adrian's wife." The floor dropped out from under Lena. "Wife?" "Ex-wife," Adrian corrected, but Victoria laughed. "Are we, though?" "The divorce was never finalized, darling. Technically, we're still very much married." Lena looked at Adrian. His face was stone, but she could see the fury behind his eyes. "Victoria, this is not the time." "Oh, I think it's exactly the time." Victoria turned to Lena. "Has he told you about our arrangement? How he sees his son every other weekend if I allow it? How he signed away any real custody because he was too busy building his empire to fight for his own child?" "Victoria, enough. Or maybe he's told you he's available, that he's free to start something new?" Victoria's eyes were sharp and cruel. "Because he's not. He's mine. He'll always be mine. The paperwork doesn't matter." Lena's throat was tight. She looked at Adrian. "Is this true? You're still married?" "Legally, it's complicated." "That's a yes or no question." Adrian's jaw clenched. "The divorce has been delayed. There are complications with the custody agreement, but we are not together." "But you are married," Lena said flatly. "On paper, not in any way that matters." "It matters to me." Lena turned to Victoria. "Excuse me." She walked out of the office, her vision blurring. Behind her, she could hear Adrian calling her name, but she didn't stop. She made it to the elevator, down to the lobby, out onto the street before she let herself feel anything. He was married. Still married. And she'd kissed him, twice. She was the other woman in a story she didn't even know she was part of. Lena walked for blocks, not caring where she was going, just needing to move. Her phone buzzed over and over. Adrian calling, Adrian texting. She ignored all of it. Finally, she ended up in a small park, sitting on a bench, staring at nothing. Her phone rang again. This time, it was a number she didn't recognize. She answered without thinking. Lena Brooks? A woman's voice said. Yes? This is Sandra Michaels from TechWave Solutions. We received your application 3 months ago, and a position just opened up. Are you still looking for work? Lena almost laughed. 3 months ago, she would have killed for this call. Now it felt like a life raft thrown to someone who was already drowning. Can I call you back? She asked. Of course, but we're looking to fill this quickly, so if you're interested, sooner is better. Lena hung up and stared at her phone. She could leave. She could take this other job, walk away from coal industries, never see Adrian again. It would be clean, simple, safe. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Adrian. Please let me explain. Lena typed back. There's nothing to explain. You lied. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything. That's the same thing. Lena, please, just talk to me. She turned off her phone. Lena stayed away from work for 2 days. She called in sick, which wasn't entirely a lie because she felt physically ill every time she thought about walking back into that building. She spent most of Thursday and Friday in her sublet, alternating between staring at the ceiling and refreshing job postings online. Sandra from TechWave Solutions had emailed her the details. The position was in Boston, decent pay, normal company with normal expectations, where she wouldn't have to worry about accidentally falling for her married boss. She should take it. She should pack up her broken suitcase and leave New York before this got any worse. But she didn't. Instead, she sat on her squeaky bed and tried to figure out what she actually wanted, not what was safe, not what made sense. What she wanted. The answer scared her. Saturday morning, someone knocked on her door. Lena ignored it. The knocking continued, persistent and demanding. Lena, I know you're in there, Marcus called through the door. Your neighbor said she saw you come in last night. Lena dragged herself off the bed and opened the door. Marcus stood there holding a bag from the deli and 2 coffees, looking concerned. You look terrible, he said. Thanks. Can I come in? She stepped aside. Marcus walked into her tiny apartment and looked around with barely concealed shock. This is where you live? It's temporary. It's depressing. He handed her one of the coffees. Okay, what happened? Everyone at work is gossiping about how you stormed out of Cole's office on Thursday and haven't been back since. I didn't storm. I walked. Semantics. What happened? What? Lena sat back down on the bed. Marcus took the only chair, which wobbled dangerously. She didn't know how much to tell him, how much she could trust him. But she was so tired of carrying this alone. I found out something about Adrian that changes everything, she said finally. Like what? Like he's not who I thought he was. Marcus waited, clearly expecting more. When Lena didn't elaborate, he sighed. Look, I don't know what's going on between you two, but I've worked at Cole Industries for 3 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. That's not helpful. I'm just saying, whatever this is, it's not nothing. It has to be nothing. He's my boss, and he's... She stopped herself. It doesn't matter. It can't happen. But you want it to. Lena looked at him. What I want isn't the point. It's exactly the point. Marcus leaned forward. You know what I see when I look at you? Someone who's spent her whole life playing it safe because she had to. Someone who's terrified to take what she actually wants because she thinks she doesn't deserve it. Am I wrong? You barely know me, so I'm right. He stood up. For what it's worth, Cole's been a nightmare since you left. Snapping at everyone, locked in his office, generally making everyone's life miserable. Whatever happened, he's not handling it well either. After Marcus left, Lena drank the coffee and ate half the sandwich and tried to think clearly. She needed to make a decision, stay or go, face Adrian or run. Her phone, which she had finally turned back on, buzzed with a new message. But it wasn't from Adrian this time. It was from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Cafe Mori, corner of 5th and 42nd, 1 hour. Victoria. Lena stared at the message. Every instinct told her to delete it, block the number, pretend she'd never seen it. But curiosity and anger and something that felt like recklessness made her respond. Fine. She showed up at the cafe exactly 1 hour later, wearing jeans and a sweater because she was done trying to look professional for people who didn't respect her. Victoria was already there, sitting at a corner table, looking immaculate in athleisure that probably cost more than Lena's monthly rent. You came, Victoria said as Lena sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I'm here. Say what you need to say. Victoria ordered a green tea from the passing waiter, then turned her attention back to Lena. I'm not here to threaten you or warn you off or any of the dramatic things you're probably expecting. Then why am I here? Because I want to give you some context. Adrian has a tendency to leave out important details when it serves him. I noticed. Victoria smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We met 12 years ago. He was nobody then, just a programmer with big ideas and no money. I believed in him. I supported him through every failed startup, every investor rejection, every night he stayed up coding until his eyes bled. And when Cole Industries finally took off, when the money started coming in, he changed. People change. He became obsessed. The company was everything. I was an afterthought. And when Ethan was born, I thought maybe it would shift his priorities, but it only made it worse. He missed the birth because he was in a meeting. Can you imagine? Missing your son's birth for a meeting? Lena didn't say anything. The divorce was my idea, Victoria continued. I was tired of being married to someone who was already married to his company. But when it came to custody, Adrian didn't fight. He signed everything I asked for because it was easier than actually dealing with the mess he'd created. And now he acts like I'm the villain for holding him to the agreement he signed. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what you're getting into. Victoria leaned forward. Adrian doesn't know how to put people first. He will always choose his company, his ambitions, his control over everything else. He'll tell you you're different, that this time it's real, but it's not. You're just the next obsession, and when something shinier comes along, you'll be yesterday's news. You don't know that. I was married to him for 8 years. I know exactly that. Victoria stood up, dropping cash on the table for her untouched tea. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to save you from making the same mistake I did. Walk away, Lena. Find someone who will actually put you first. She left before Lena could respond. Lena sat there for a long time, Victoria's words echoing in her head. Was she right? Was Lena just another thing for Adrian to conquer, to control, to eventually lose interest in? Or was Victoria a bitter ex-wife trying to sabotage any chance of Adrian moving on? Lena didn't know, and the not knowing was killing her. When she finally left the cafe, she walked without direction, ending up in Central Park. It was a beautiful day, warm and sunny, and the park was full of people living their uncomplicated lives. She found an empty bench and sat down, watching a father play catch with his daughter, and thought about Adrian's son, Ethan, who barely got to see his father because of decisions made in anger and hurt. Her phone rang. Adrian's name lit up the screen. This time she answered. Lena. His voice was rough, like he hadn't slept. Thank you for picking up. What do you want, Adrian? To explain. To apologize. To... He paused. Where are you? Central Park. Why? Stay there. I'm coming to you. Adrian. But he'd already hung up. 20 minutes later, she saw him walking across the grass toward her bench. He was in jeans and a t-shirt, no suit, no armor of professionalism. He looked exhausted and lost, and nothing like the controlled CEO who ran a billion-dollar company. He sat down next to her without asking, leaving space between them, but not much. Victoria came to see you, he said. It wasn't a question. How did you know? Because I know her, and because she texted me afterward to tell me she'd done me a favor by warning you off. Maybe she did. Adrian turned to look at her. What did she tell you? That you'll always choose your company over everything else, that I'm just another obsession, that you don't know how to put people first. And you believed her? I don't know what to believe, Lena said honestly. You didn't tell me you were still married. You let me kiss you twice, knowing that you weren't free. What am I supposed to think? The divorce has been filed for over 2 years, Adrian said, his voice tight. The only reason it's not finalized is because Victoria keeps finding new reasons to delay it. She wants more money, more control over Ethan's custody, more of everything. My lawyers have been fighting it, but the system moves slowly. Why didn't you just tell me that from the beginning? Because I was trying to keep my personal life separate from work. Because I didn't want you to look at me the way you're looking at me right now. He ran a hand through his hair. And because I'm a coward. I knew if I told you about the marriage, about Ethan, about all the ways I've failed at being a decent human being, you'd see me differently. And I liked the way you looked at me. like I was worth something beyond my bank account. Lena's chest was tight. You are worth something beyond your bank account. Am I? Because most days I feel like that's all I am. A walking checkbook who occasionally sees his son and runs a company and has nothing else. That's not true, isn't it? He turns to face her fully. Victoria was right about some things. I did miss Ethan's birth. I did sign that custody agreement without fighting because I was too overwhelmed to deal with it. I have prioritized work over people for most of my adult life, but she's wrong about you. How? You're not an obsession. He stopped, searching for words. You're the first person in years who's made me want to be better, who's made me question whether building an empire is worth it if you're alone at the top. You scare the hell out of me, Lena, because you make me want things I don't know how to have. Lena didn't know what to say. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let herself fall into this completely, but she'd been let down too many times by too many people to trust easily. I met with a recruiter, she said quietly. There's a job in Boston, good pay, normal company. I could leave New York, start over again. Adrian's face went carefully blank. Is that what you want? I don't know. Part of me thinks it would be easier, safer. And the other part? The other part is terrified that if I leave, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what could have happened if I'd been brave enough to stay. Adrian reached for her hand. She let him take it. I can't promise this will be easy, he said. I can't promise I won't mess it up, because I probably will. I'm not good at this. Relationships, vulnerability, any of it. But I can promise that you're not a mistake to me. You're not a distraction. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years. And if you give me a chance, I'll spend every day trying to deserve you. That's a lot of pressure. I know. What about work? What about the fact that you're my boss and everyone already thinks I'm sleeping with you to get ahead? Then let them think it. Or I can transfer you to a different department. Or you can report to someone else, whatever makes you comfortable. None of this is comfortable. Good relationships aren't supposed to be comfortable. They're supposed to be worth the discomfort. Lena looked at him, this complicated man who'd somehow become essential to her in the span of a few weeks. What about Ethan? What about him? If we do this, if we try, I'm not going to be some secret you keep from your son. I'm not going to be the reason his parents' relationship gets more complicated. I wouldn't want you to be. Adrian's hand tightened on hers. Ethan is the most important person in my life. If you and I do this, you'll be part of that life. All of it. That's terrifying. I know. For me too. They sat in silence for a moment, the city moving around them, people passing by without knowing they were witnessing a turning point. I need time, Lena said finally, to think, to figure out if I'm brave enough for this. How much time? I don't know. A few days? Adrian nodded slowly. Okay. But Lena, while you're thinking, remember this. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. I'm falling for you. Maybe I already have, and I don't do that lightly. He left her sitting on the bench, and Lena watched him walk away, her hand still tingling from his kiss. She spent the next 3 days in a fog of indecision. She made a list of pros and cons. She called Sandra at TechWave and asked for more time to consider the Boston offer. She avoided Marcus's questions and her mother's phone calls and the voice in her head that kept screaming that she was going to regret whatever choice she made. On Tuesday evening, she was heating up ramen in her sublet's pathetic kitchen when someone knocked on her door. She assumed it was Marcus again, ready to give her another pep talk, but when she opened the door, she found Adrian standing there. He was holding flowers. Grocery store flowers, nothing fancy, slightly wilted at the edges. These are terrible, he said by way of greeting. I have no idea how to buy flowers, but the woman at the bodega said they were nice, so here. Lena took them, fighting a smile. What are you doing here? I'm done giving you time to think. I'm here to make my case. Adrian, just listen. He stepped into her apartment without being invited, looked around at the depressing space, and his face tightened. You live here. I'm aware. This is not acceptable. It's what I can afford. Not anymore, it's not. He turned to face her. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to move out of this place. I'm going to help you find somewhere decent, somewhere you don't have to climb 4 flights of stairs to get to a bathroom that probably has black mold. I don't need your charity. It's not charity. It's me refusing to let someone I care about live somewhere that makes me want to set things on fire. He moved closer. And before you argue, I'm not buying you anything. I'm helping you find something you can afford with your salary, which, by the way, is getting a substantial raise starting next month. You can't just give me a raise because of whatever this is. I can give you a raise because you're excellent at your job and you've earned it 3 times over. The timing is convenient, but the reason is legitimate. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Stop making this harder than it needs to be. That's what I do. I make things hard. I know. It's one of the things I love about you. Lena froze. What? Adrian looked as surprised as she felt. I didn't mean to say that out loud. But you said it. I did. He didn't back away from it. I love you, Lena. I don't know when it happened. Maybe on the plane when you grabbed my hand during takeoff. Maybe in Berlin when you spoke German and made that entire deal possible. Maybe every day in between. But I love you, and I'm tired of pretending I don't. Lena couldn't breathe. That's not fair. Life's not fair. You can't just show up here with wilted flowers and tell me you love me and expect that to fix everything. I'm not trying to fix everything. I'm trying to be honest. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you. I'm still technically married, even though that marriage ended years ago. I have a son who complicates everything. I work too much, and I'm terrible at expressing emotions, and I will probably drive you crazy. But I love you. And if you can find it in yourself to give me a chance, I promise I will spend every day trying to be the man you deserve. I don't need you to be perfect, Lena said, tears burning in her eyes. I just need you to be honest with me, always. No more secrets. No more secrets, Adrian agreed. Starting with this, I fired Victoria today. What? She worked as a consultant for one of our subsidiary companies. I didn't realize it until my lawyers brought it to my attention. Apparently, she's been feeding information to our competitors for months. I had legal grounds to terminate the contract, so I did. She's going to make your life hell. She was already doing that. At least now she can't do it from inside my company. He smiled slightly. She also can't delay the divorce anymore. My lawyers found evidence of her misconduct. The judge is fast-tracking the finalization. I'll be officially divorced in 6 weeks. You did all that in 3 days? I was motivated. Lena laughed, tears spilling over. You're insane. Probably. Is that a problem? No. She kissed him, tasting salt and relief, and the beginning of something that felt terrifyingly like hope. I love you too. I'm terrified, and this is probably a disaster waiting to happen, but I love you. Adrian kissed her back, deeper this time, like he was trying to memorize the moment. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. So you're staying? Not taking the Boston job? I'm staying, but I want my own apartment, something I pay for myself. And I want to meet Ethan properly, when the time is right. And I want everyone at work to know that I earned my position, that this isn't about us sleeping together. Done, done, and done. He looked around her sublet again. Can we please get you out of here tonight, though? I'll pay for a hotel until you find a place. I don't need a hotel. Then stay with me. Adrian, I have 5 bedrooms and you can have your own. I just can't leave you here knowing you're climbing 4 flights to a mattress that sounds like it's dying every time you move. Lena looked around her depressing sublet, then back at Adrian's hopeful, determined face. Okay, but just until I find a place. Just until you find a place, he agreed, though the way he smiled told her he had other plans. They packed her few belongings, loaded them into Adrian's car that was waiting downstairs, and drove to his apartment in Tribeca. It was exactly as ridiculous as Lena had imagined, all floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture, and a view that made her Brooklyn sublet look like a prison cell. This is obscene, she said, walking through the living room. It's an investment. It's 3,000 square feet for one person. 2 people now, Adrian corrected, at least temporarily. He showed her to a guest room that was bigger than her entire sublet had been, with an actual comfortable bed and a bathroom that had water pressure and didn't leak. Lena dropped her suitcase and just stood there, overwhelmed. Adrian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You okay? I don't know. This doesn't feel real. It's real. You're here. I'm here. This is happening. Lena turned in his arms. What if I wake up and it's all gone? Then I'll still be here when you wake up, and we'll figure it out together. He kissed her forehead. I'm not going anywhere, Lena. Not this time. They ordered takeout and ate it sitting on his couch, talking about everything and nothing. Adrian told her about Ethan, about the custody schedule, about his hope that maybe now with the divorce finalizing, he could fight for more time with his son. Lena told him about her mother, about the town she'd left behind, about the fear that still woke her up some nights that this was all temporary and she'd end up right back where she started. That's not going to happen, Adrian said firmly. You know why? Why? Because you're too stubborn to fail, and because I'm not going to let you. Later, lying in the guest room's comfortable bed, Lena stared at the ceiling and tried to process everything that had happened. A month ago, she'd been terrified on a plane, fumbling with a seatbelt, convinced her life was over before it began. Now she was in a billionaire's apartment, in love with a man who was still technically married but fighting to fix it, starting a career she'd never imagined possible. It was messy and complicated, and nothing like what she'd planned. It was perfect. The next 6 weeks were the strangest of Lena's life. She went to work every day at Cole Industries, did her job with the same intensity she'd always had, and came home to Adrian's apartment that still didn't feel like hers, even though he kept insisting it was. They were careful at the office, maintaining professional distance, but everyone knew anyway. The rumors started immediately. I heard she's living with him, someone whispered in the bathroom while Lena was in one of the stalls. Of course she is. That's how she got promoted so fast. I mean, can you blame her? If I could sleep my way to the top, I probably would too. Lena flushed the toilet loudly, and the conversation stopped. When she came out, both women had the decency to look embarrassed before hurrying out. Marcus found her later, standing by the coffee machine and staring into space. You okay? Do you think I slept my way into this job? Lena asked bluntly. No, I think you're brilliant, and you earned every bit of it. But I also think people are going to talk regardless of what's true. How do I make them stop? You don't. You just keep being so good at what you do that eventually they'll feel stupid for doubting you. It was easier said than done. Lena threw herself into work with even more determination, volunteering for the hardest projects, staying late, coming in early. She rebuilt their entire security infrastructure from the ground up, implementing protocols that would have taken most teams months to develop. And slowly, grudgingly, people started to respect her for her work rather than dismiss her for her relationship. But it still hurt. Every whisper, every knowing look, every assumption that she was nothing without Adrian behind her. At home, things were both easier and harder. Adrian was different outside the office, softer in ways that surprised her. He cooked breakfast on weekends, terrible scrambled eggs that he was unreasonably proud of. He left her notes around the apartment, stupid things like, "Don't forget to eat lunch," or "You left your laptop charger in the living room again." He was trying, and Lena could see the effort even when he stumbled. They fought sometimes. About work, about boundaries, about the fact that Adrian still had a habit of making decisions without consulting her first. "You can't just book me on a flight to San Francisco without asking," Lena said one evening, staring at the calendar invite he'd sent. "It's for the security conference. You need to be there." "Then ask me if I can go. Don't just assume." "I'm asking now." "That's not asking. That's telling me after you've already decided." Adrian looked genuinely confused. "What's the difference?" "The difference is respect. I'm not your employee at home, Adrian. I'm your partner. Act like it." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right. I'm sorry. Cancel the flight?" "No, I'll go, but next time ask me first." "Deal." They were learning each other, figuring out how to exist in the same space without destroying each other. It wasn't always smooth, but it was real. The divorce finalized on a Tuesday in late June. Adrian came home that evening with a bottle of champagne and a look of relief so profound it made Lena's chest ache. "It's done," he said, setting the bottle on the counter. "Officially, legally done." "How do you feel?" "Free? Terrified? Like I can finally start over." He pulled her into his arms. "Like I can finally do this right." They didn't drink the champagne that night. Instead, they sat on the couch, and Adrian told her everything about his marriage that he'd been holding back. The good parts, the terrible parts, the ways they'd both failed each other. And Lena listened without judgment, just holding his hand, letting him purge years of guilt and regret. "I don't want to repeat those mistakes with you," Adrian said quietly. I don't want to wake up in 5 years and realize I've chosen work over you so many times that you're gone. Then don't, Lena said simply. Make different choices. It's not that easy. It is actually. You just have to decide what matters more. 2 weeks later, Adrian asked if she wanted to meet Ethan. Lena panicked. Already? He's coming to stay with me this weekend. I want him to know you're part of my life. What if he hates me? He won't hate you. You don't know that. Kids are weird about their parents dating. Lena. Adrian cupped her face. He's 7. He likes video games and dinosaurs and mac and cheese. You're going to be fine. Ethan arrived on Saturday morning, a blur of energy and questions. He had Adrian's eyes and his mother's blonde hair, and he looked at Lena with open curiosity. Are you my dad's girlfriend? He asked immediately. Ethan, Adrian said, but Lena held up a hand. Yeah, I am. Is that okay? Ethan considered this. Do you like dinosaurs? I don't know much about them, but I'm willing to learn. Okay, you can stay. He turned to Adrian. Can we get pizza for lunch? Just like that, Lena was accepted into their small circle. She spent the weekend watching Ethan explain the difference between a T-Rex and an Allosaurus, playing video games she was terrible at, and seeing a side of Adrian she'd never witnessed. He was patient with his son, present in a way he never was at work, and watching them together made Lena fall even harder. Sunday evening, after Ethan had been picked up by Victoria, Adrian found Lena standing by the window, looking out at the city. You're quiet, he said. I'm thinking. About? About how this is the life I never thought I'd have, and how scared I am that it's going to disappear. Adrian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. It's not going to disappear. You can't promise that. Maybe not, but I can promise to fight like hell to keep it. August arrived with sweltering heat and the company's biggest product launch of the year. Lena had been working on the security protocols for months, and the pressure was immense. If anything went wrong, if there was any breach or vulnerability, it would be on her. The launch event was scheduled for a Thursday evening, a massive presentation at the company's headquarters, with investors, press, and employees all in attendance. Lena spent the week before barely sleeping, triple-checking every system, running scenarios until her eyes crossed. The night before the launch, she was still at her desk at midnight when Adrian appeared. Go home, he said. I need to check. You've checked everything twice already. The systems are solid. You're solid. Go home and sleep. What if something goes wrong? Then we'll handle it. Together. He pulled her out of her chair. Come on, I'm driving you home. In the car, Lena stared out the window at the dark streets. I don't know why I'm so nervous. I've done the work. I know it's good. Because you care. Because this matters to you. Adrian glanced at her. That's not a weakness, Lena. That's what makes you excellent. The launch went perfectly. The systems held, the presentation was flawless, and by the end of the night, Cole Industries had secured commitments worth over $2 billion. Lena stood in the back of the room, watching Adrian field questions from investors, and felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with their relationship and everything to do with the work they'd built together. After the event, there was a celebration. Champagne, catered food, speeches from executives. Lena was standing with Marcus, half listening to him complain about one of the senior analysts, when the room suddenly went quiet. She looked up. Adrian was on the small stage at the front of the room, holding a microphone. Before we wrap up tonight, I want to say something, Adrian began, and his eyes found Lena in the crowd. 5 months ago, we hired a junior analyst who stopped a major security breach on her first week, who rebuilt our entire infrastructure, who made tonight's launch possible. Most of you know her as Lena Brooks, my security analyst. Lena's face went hot. Everyone was looking at her. What you might not know, Adrian continued, is that she's also the woman I love, and I'm done pretending that those two things are separate. The room was completely silent. There are going to be people who say she didn't earn her position, that she's here because we're together. And I need everyone in this room to hear me when I say this. Lena Brooks is the best hire I've ever made. She's brilliant, dedicated, and if anything, I'm the one benefiting from her being here, not the other way around. Lena couldn't breathe. Marcus was grinning beside her. And one more thing, Adrian said, and he stepped off the stage, walking through the crowd toward Lena. The room parted for him like water. When he reached her, he pulled a small box from his pocket and got down on one knee. "Oh my God," Lena whispered. "Lena Brooks," Adrian said, looking up at her with those gray eyes that had first caught her attention on a plane 5 months ago. "You terrify me. You challenge me. You make me want to be better. And I don't want to spend another day without you being officially, legally, permanently mine. Will you marry me?" The room was holding its breath. Lena was aware of hundreds of eyes on them, of phones recording this moment, of the fact that this would be all over social media in minutes. She didn't care. "You're proposing to me in front of the entire company," she said. "I am, so everyone knows you're not a secret. You're not a mistake. You're my choice." Lena looked at the ring, a simple diamond that somehow felt exactly right. Then she looked at Adrian, this complicated, imperfect man who'd somehow become her entire world. "Yes," she said. "Obviously, yes." The room erupted in applause as Adrian stood and kissed her, and Lena kissed him back, not caring who was watching, not caring about the gossip or the assumptions or any of it. This was her life. She'd earned it, and she was keeping it. The next few months were a whirlwind. They set a wedding date for December, something small and intimate despite Adrian's ability to throw a massive event. Lena insisted on paying for half, even though her half barely covered the flowers, and Adrian let her without argument because he was learning that some battles weren't worth fighting. Victoria contested the engagement, trying to use it as leverage to renegotiate custody, but Adrian's lawyers shut it down fast. The divorce was final. The custody agreement was adjusted to give Adrian more time with Ethan, and Victoria eventually backed off when she realized she was fighting a losing battle. Lena found her own apartment in September, a one-bedroom in Greenwich Village that she could actually afford with her salary. She lived there for exactly 3 weeks before Adrian convinced her to give it up and just move in with him officially. "You're paying rent on a place you never sleep in," he pointed out. "That's stupid. It's my safety net. I'm your safety net. That's not the same thing. Then keep it. But admit you're only keeping it because you're scared, not because you need it." He was right. She was scared. Scared that if she gave up her own place, she'd lose the last piece of independence she had. Scared that if things fell apart, she'd have nothing to fall back on. But she was tired of living scared. She gave up the apartment. The wedding was planned for the Saturday before Christmas at a small venue upstate with just 50 guests. Lena's mother flew in from Missouri, overwhelmed by everything and trying to hide it. Ethan was going to be the ring bearer, a job he took very seriously. Marcus was somehow in charge of the music, which worried everyone. 2 days before the wedding, Lena had a minor breakdown in Adrian's apartment, surrounded by last-minute details and seating charts. "I can't do this," she said, staring at the mess. "Can't marry me or can't deal with the wedding planning?" Adrian asked calmly. "The second one. Maybe both, I don't know." He took the seating chart out of her hands. "The wedding planner will handle this. You just need to show up and say yes. Can you do that?" "What if I'm making a mistake?" "Are you?" "I don't know. Everything happened so fast. 5 months ago I was terrified on a plane, and now I'm marrying a billionaire and living in Tribeca and working a job I love, and it feels like a dream. What if I wake up?" Adrian pulled her into his lap. "Then we'll figure it out, together. That's how this works." "I'm scared I'm going to lose it all." "You're not going to lose it. But even if you did, you'd rebuild. That's what you do, Lena. You survive, you adapt, you fight." He kissed her forehead. "But you're not going to have to do it alone anymore. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The wedding day arrived cold and clear. Lena stood in a small room at the venue, wearing a simple white dress that she'd bought on sale and altered herself, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her mother stood behind her, fixing her hair. "You look beautiful," her mother said quietly. "I look terrified." "You look happy. That's better than beautiful." There was a knock on the door. Marcus poked his head in. "Ready? Because Cole is pacing out there like he thinks you might run." "I'm not running." "Good. Because I have money riding on this wedding actually happening." The ceremony was short and simple. Lena walked down the aisle to a string quartet playing something she didn't recognize, and when she saw Adrian at the front, looking at her like she was the only person in the world, all her fear evaporated. This was right. This was real. This was hers. They said their vows, exchanged rings with Ethan's help, who only dropped them once, and kissed while 50 people applauded. And then it was done. Lena Brooks became Lena Cole, and the poor girl from Missouri who'd been terrified on a plane became the wife of a man who'd built an empire and chosen her anyway. The reception was loud and chaotic in the best way. Marcus's music choices were questionable but enthusiastic. Ethan ran around with the other kids, high on cake and attention. Lena's mother cried happy tears and told anyone who would listen how proud she was of her daughter. Late in the evening, Lena and Adrian snuck outside for a moment of quiet. The venue was on a hill overlooking a valley, and the stars were bright in the winter sky. "How are you feeling?" Adrian asked, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. "Like I can't believe this is my life." "Get used to it." "What if I mess it up?" "Then we'll fix it." "What if I mess it up?" "Then I'll yell at you, and we'll fix it." Adrian laughed. "That sounds about right." They stood there in the cold, holding each other, and Lena thought about how far she'd come. From a girl with $47 and a broken suitcase to a woman who'd built a career, found love, and learned that taking risks was terrifying but necessary. She thought about the plane ride that had started everything, the turbulence that had pushed her into Adrian's arms, the kiss that had changed the trajectory of her entire life. Some people would say it was luck. Others would say it was fate. Lena knew it was neither. It was just two broken people choosing to be brave at the exact same moment and somehow making it work. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me. For believing I was worth something when I didn't believe it myself." "You were always worth something," Adrian said. "I just had the good sense to notice." They went back inside to their wedding, to the music and laughter, and the life they were building together. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be fights and mistakes and moments when they both wanted to give up. But they'd also have mornings with terrible scrambled eggs, evenings with Ethan explaining dinosaurs, late nights working side by side on problems only they could solve together. 6 months later, Lena stood in front of the entire company at the quarterly meeting, presenting the new security infrastructure she'd designed. When she finished, the room applauded, and it had nothing to do with who she was married to and everything to do with the work she'd done. After the meeting, a young woman approached her nervously. "Ms. Cole, I just started last week, junior analyst position, and I wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For showing me it's possible. I came from nothing too. And seeing you here doing what you do, it makes me think maybe I can make it too." Lena looked at this girl who reminded her so much of herself just months ago and smiled. "You can. Just work hard, be brave, and don't let anyone convince you that you don't belong here. Even when they talk, especially when they talk, make them eat their words by being undeniable." The girl nodded, eyes bright with determination, and walked away. Adrian appeared at Lena's side. "Giving advice to the new recruits?" "Trying to. She reminded me of me. Terrified and brilliant?" "Something like that." They walked out of the conference room together, and Lena thought about how strange life was, how a single moment could change everything, how fear and courage existed in the same breath, how the worst day of your life could turn into the best thing that ever happened to you if you were just brave enough to see it through. She'd boarded a plane 5 months ago with nothing but desperation and a dream. She'd fumbled with a seatbelt, kissed a stranger, and accidentally fallen in love with the last person she should have. And now she was here, building a life that terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure. It wasn't perfect. She and Adrian still fought about work-life balance. Ethan still missed events because of Victoria's schedule. The gossip at work still stung sometimes. Lena still woke up some mornings convinced this was all temporary, that she'd blink and find herself back in that depressing sublet with nothing to her name. But then Adrian would bring her terrible coffee in bed, or Ethan would ask her to help with his dinosaur project, or a coworker would come to her with a problem because they trusted her expertise, and she'd remember that this was real. She'd earned it, and she was allowed to keep it. On a Friday evening in early summer, exactly 1 year after that first terrifying flight, Lena and Adrian sat on their balcony watching the sun set over Manhattan. Ethan was with them for the weekend, currently inside playing video games and eating pizza. "Do you ever think about that plane ride?" Lena asked. "Every day," Adrian admitted. "I think about how I almost didn't take that flight. I was supposed to fly private, but there was a scheduling conflict. If I'd pushed, they would have figured it out. And we never would have met. And my life would be completely different." He pulled her closer. "Worse. Definitely worse." "You don't know that." "I do, actually. He kissed the top of her head. You're the best turbulence that ever happened to me. Lena laughed. That's terrible. It's true, though. Inside, they could hear Ethan shouting at the TV, some victory or defeat in his game. The city stretched out below them, full of people with their own stories, their own struggles, their own moments of choosing between safety and risk. Lena had spent most of her life choosing safety, playing it small, expecting nothing so she wouldn't be disappointed. And then one day she'd gotten on a plane she couldn't afford, taken a job she wasn't qualified for, and fallen in love with a man who should have been completely out of her league. She'd chosen risk, and risk had chosen her back. I love you, she said quietly. I know, Adrian said. I love you too. Even though I'm a disaster? Especially because you're a disaster. You're my disaster. They sat there as the sky turned purple and gold, as the city lights began to flicker on, as their life continued to unfold in ways neither of them had planned, but both of them had chosen. And Lena realized that maybe perfect landings weren't about everything going smoothly. Maybe they were about finding someone who'd help you navigate the turbulence, who'd hold your hand when you were terrified, who'd kiss you when the world felt like it was falling apart. Maybe perfect landings were just about finding your way home, even when you didn't know that's what you were looking for. And Lena had found hers.